Imagine standing on the edge of a vast, unexplored land, nothing but mountains, rivers, and the promise of a new beginning. In the 1800s, thousands answered that call. They weren't chasing comfort. They were chasing destiny. This is the story of how courage built America. The story of westward expansion begins with a vision that stretched beyond the settled borders of the young United States and into the vast, untamed wilderness that lay beyond. In the early 1800s, America was still finding its identity. The Revolution had ended, independence had been won, and now a new question echoed through the minds of its people. Where do we go from here? The answer came in the form of land, open, rich, and full of promise. When Thomas Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the United States doubled in size overnight. This moment was more than a political transaction. It was an awakening. Suddenly, the horizon expanded, and so did the American dream. The Mississippi River no longer marked the end of the known world. Beyond it lay endless forests, wide plains, towering mountains, and possibilities as vast as the sky itself. Families began to pack their lives into wooden wagons. They left behind the safety of cities, the comfort of neighbors, and the predictability of the East. The West called to them, not with certainty, but with opportunity. Every creak of a wagon wheel became a declaration of hope. They traveled on trails carved through the wilderness, following rivers and mountain passes, driven by faith in a better tomorrow. The West was more than a direction. It was a symbol. It represented freedom, self-reliance, and the belief that anyone, through hard work and courage, could shape their own destiny. This belief came to be known as manifest destiny. The idea that it was America's divine right and duty to expand across the continent. It wasn't merely about land, it was about purpose. The settlers saw themselves as pioneers of progress, carrying civilization, democracy, and light into places that were, to them, unknown and untamed. But progress has two faces. As settlers moved westward, they met the Native American tribes, who had lived on those lands for centuries. To those tribes, this expansion was not destiny. It was invasion. What one people called progress, another called loss. Homes were destroyed, traditions uprooted, and cultures forever changed. The story of expansion is both inspiring and heartbreaking, a testament to human ambition and a reminder of its cost. Still, the movement westward continued with unstoppable force. The government encouraged settlement through laws like the Homestead Act, which offered land to those willing to farm it. The promise of land ownership, something that had been out of reach for many, became a dream within grasp. The prairies filled with cabins, and small towns rose like beacons of determination across the wilderness. Each new settlement was a step toward a larger vision, an America that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. As the decades passed, this dream grew stronger. Railroads cut across the land, connecting distant regions and fueling commerce. Rivers became highways of trade, and trails became lifelines for migration. The movement was not just physical, it was spiritual. It reflected the restless energy of a people who refused to stay still, who saw in every horizon a challenge to overcome and a future to claim. The settlers' struggles were immense: disease, harsh weather, isolation, and scarcity. Yet, through every hardship, the flame of ambition burned bright. They built homes, schools, churches, and communities in places once thought uninhabitable. They turned wilderness into farmland and wilderness paths into cities. Westward expansion was not a single event. It was a transformation. It reshaped the nation's geography, economy, and identity. It tested the strength of those who pursued it and the resilience of those who resisted it. It was a journey powered by dreams, driven by courage, and marked by sacrifice. For every victory, there was a loss. For every settlement, a story of struggle. And though the land itself was vast and often unforgiving, it became the stage where the American spirit proved itself, bold, determined. As the rush for gold surged through California and the Western territories, the United States was no longer a young, uncertain nation. It was becoming a restless giant, driven by ambition and discovery. The gold rush had done more than spark dreams of fortune. It had accelerated a transformation that would shape the country's identity for generations. With every wagon that rolled west, and every town that rose from the dust, America's landscape and spirit were being rewritten. Railroads began to stretch like veins across the continent, carrying not just people and goods, but the pulse of a new kind of progress. The same energy that drew men to rivers of gold now drew them to build cities, farms, and industries that would define a new era. The gold rush created an economy of opportunity, but also of imbalance. While some men returned east with fortunes that changed their lives, many more were left with empty hands. Yet even those who failed to find gold often stayed. They saw that the true wealth of the West lay not in the shimmering flakes beneath the soil, but in the fertile land, the open sky, and the promise of a fresh start. They became merchants, ranchers, and farmers. They built homes where once there were only tents and trails. The dream of gold slowly transformed into a deeper dream, the dream of belonging, of building something lasting. From these beginnings, cities like San Francisco, Sacramento, and Denver emerged, becoming centers of trade and innovation that carried the momentum of the gold rush into the next century. The West also became a land of contradiction. It was a place where freedom and exploitation existed side by side, where opportunity came at a price. The same expansion that offered new beginnings to settlers brought destruction to Native American tribes. Lands that had been sacred for centuries were seized, mined, and altered beyond recognition. While wildlife vanished, rivers ran muddy with silt, and forests were stripped bare to feed the hunger of progress. Yet in the minds of those pushing westward, these changes were signs of growth, not loss. They saw themselves as the builders of a great nation, forging civilization out of wilderness, even as that very wilderness and its original inhabitants faded before them. As railroads connected the East to the West, communication and commerce flourished like never before. Goods that once took months to transport could now be delivered in days. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 symbolized the unity of a vast and varied land. It turned what was once a perilous journey into a path of possibility. People from all walks of life, immigrants, freed slaves, entrepreneurs, and visionaries, found new purpose in the expanding frontier. The gold rush had shown the world that the American dream was not confined by geography. It could stretch as far as human courage allowed. This period also gave rise to innovation. Mining technology advanced, engineering projects expanded, and agriculture adapted to the new environments of the West. With each discovery came new challenges and new solutions. The spirit of the pioneers, resilient, inventive, and driven, became embedded in the national character. The pursuit of gold may have started as a scramble for wealth, but it evolved into a philosophy of endurance and transformation. Every obstacle became an invitation to adapt, to learn, and to push further. The echoes of this age reached far beyond the hills of California. It changed how people thought about risk, reward, and destiny. It created a cultural shift, an understanding that success was not guaranteed, but earned through persistence. It encouraged people to dream bigger, to travel farther, and to see hardship as a necessary step toward progress. The gold rush became a symbol of possibility, an enduring chapter in the larger story of how ambition shapes nations. In every miner's pan, every railroad tie, and every dusty trail lay the same idea, that the search It was in the midst of this restless westward movement that a single discovery would ignite one of the most dramatic chapters in American history. On a cold January morning in 1848, a carpenter named James W. Marshall was working at a sawmill owned by John Sutter near the American River in California. As the water rushed through the mill race, Marshall noticed something glimmering beneath the surface. He bent down, reached into the mud, and lifted a few shiny flakes of gold. That simple moment, quiet and almost accidental, would set off a chain reaction that would transform not only California but the entire nation. Within weeks, whispers spread. By the time confirmation reached the East Coast, those whispers had become a roar. Newspapers shouted the news. Gold had been found in the West. Almost overnight, a wave of humanity began to move. From the cities of the East, from the farms of the Midwest, and from distant lands across the oceans, thousands of people packed their hopes into wagons, ships, and backpacks, and began their journey westward. They came from every background and every corner of the world, farmers, merchants, sailors, and dreamers. Some came from Europe, others from South America or China. They left behind their homes, their families, and their certainties to chase the promise of instant fortune. This movement became known as the California Gold Rush, a phenomenon that captured imaginations and redefined what people believed was possible. By 1849, nearly 100,000 people had arrived in California, earning the nickname 49ers. They filled the ports of San Francisco, turning it from a quiet settlement into a booming city almost overnight. Camps and mining towns sprang up wherever gold was rumored to be found. The landscape transformed into a patchwork of tents, sluices, and muddy trails. In the air there was a feverish energy, a mix of greed, hope, and desperation. For many, the dream of gold became an obsession. They spent long days panning in icy rivers, digging through rocky hillsides and sifting through dirt in search of a few shining specks that might change their lives forever. Yet, the gold rush was about more than gold. It became a symbol of ambition, of what happens when hope burns brighter than fear. For the people who traveled thousands of miles, this was not just a search for wealth, it was a search for freedom, for a new beginning, for a chance to shape their own destiny. The gold rush turned California into a melting pot of cultures, languages, and dreams. The camps buzzed with life, stories shared around campfires, deals struck in hastily built saloons, songs sung in dozens of tongues. Every person believed they were standing at the edge of something miraculous, something that could change everything in a single moment. But for every success story, there were countless tales of hardship. Few struck it rich. Many found only exhaustion, hunger, and loss. The journey itself was perilous. Disease, accidents, and bandits claimed many lives. The cost of supplies soared, and the promise of easy fortune often dissolved into disappointment. Still they stayed, driven by the stubborn hope that tomorrow might bring better luck. In the process, new towns emerged, and with them, the foundations of California's modern identity. Businesses thrived. Blacksmiths, merchants, and farmers who supplied the miners often earned more than the miners themselves. The sudden population boom pushed California toward rapid statehood, and within just 2 years, it joined the Union as the 31st state. The gold rush also revealed both the best and worst of human nature. It showed resilience, creativity, and courage, but it also exposed greed, prejudice, and exploitation. Native communities suffered displacement and destruction as thousands invaded their lands. The environment bore deep scars from mining, and tensions rose among different groups struggling to survive and succeed. Yet through all, imagine standing on the edge of a vast, unexplored land, nothing but mountains, rivers, and the promise of a new beginning. In the 1800s, thousands answered that call. They weren't chasing comfort. They were chasing destiny. This is the story of how courage built America,